Hello, I'm ED-SKaR. It is, I've no idea what it is, o'clock, and it is very warm. But we've just had the third edition FAQ for Bolt Action. We have the rulebook. We have the second kind of iteration for Armies of Germany, and I think this is the first one for the Armies of USA book, so we'll have a proper look through that. And interesting this time is that all of the updates are in this lovely pink. So they're nice and easy to find. We still haven't got rid of that 36-inch minimum on the multiple launchers, so that's going to suck. I've got one of those coming with me at an event tomorrow. I was hoping for maybe a little change there, but no, multiple launchers still having 36-inch minimum basically renders them useless. But let's stop talking about that. That hasn't changed. Let's talk about what has changed. So the third edition rulebook stuff first. And we have vehicle-mounted flak guns do not halve their shots when fired against aircraft. Wasn't that always the case? That might just be a spelling mistake or kind of rewording to clarify it. That seems to just be how it was before. Unfortunately, I should mention this straight up. Someone has accidentally borrowed my rulebook, so I don't have it here in front of me. Usually I'd like to compare stuff, but I can't do that today. 165, one of the mission objectives. You must end your activation within 3 inches of the objectives and no enemy unit of any type. Again, might just be a clarification or a spelling mistake. I thought that was how it worked before. Company commanders now have the ability to take bicycles, horses, or motorcycles for the appropriate points change. That's kind of cool, but it does require that the compulsory units are mounted on the same mount. So you'd need to take 2 in a rifle platoon. You need to take 2. Oh, it's company commander, so it has to be a rifle platoon. Your first 2 squads have to be on that same mount for a company commander to take advantage of that. I think that's a really cool thematic list idea. We very rarely see mounted infantry in this way. Mounted on transport vehicles we see a lot more, but kind of cavalry, bicycles, and motorcycles we don't really see that much. Certainly in my local group. I do have some Cossacks on the way that I need to get back to, so maybe there's something there. Next one is transports and tows, and that ambulances are an exception, is that they count as transports but don't have a transport capacity. An ambulance can be fielded in any platoon instead of an infantry medic as long as the platoon allows. As long as the platoon allows transports. So is that meaning that an ambulance, kind of a vehicle medic, the ambulance is going to potentially run away at the end of the turn if it's nearer to the enemy? Whereas an infantry medic doesn't do that. That's interesting. I really want to get my rulebook and change and have a read through that, because that's I'm not sure what has changed here, but it seems to be now that ambulances will be running away if they're closer to the enemy at the end of a turn. Okay, we've got Lend-Lease vehicles for the British and Soviets. Oh, actually, no, this is just the Soviet. So what's the British Lend-Lease? Is that a separate list? I don't remember. Anyway, Soviet Army Lend-Lease vehicles not getting gyrostablers on any of the vehicles. I will have to check this historically. That the Americans weren't kind of fitting gyrostablers on the Lend-Lease vehicles. That may be hearsay and rumor, so I'll have to kind of check on that. But then we also have the M3 white scout car. Actually, that's one that should have been there from the beginning, because there's a few iconic pictures, photographs of Soviet, the white scout car in Soviet service. Okay, rolling off to some of the FAQs. We've got one about the anti-tank lunge mines for the Japanese. You take 3 as a single slot, but you can only do it once. So in a rifle platoon, the Japanese also get an extra AT rifle, so you can take an AT rifle and 3 lunge mines, or you can take in a heavy weapons platoon everything as AT rifles except for 1 slot, which then becomes 3 lunge mines if you want. I've actually got the CO cast Japanese support weapons. So I've only got one plastic lunge mine, and I've got 2 of the CO class ones. Do tanks need a line of sight when assaulting? Yes, they do. That makes sense. If a tank is assaulting an enemy whilst moving through rough ground, does it have to move at least 4.5 inches, half a run? Interesting. So normal movement for a tank would be 9, and on a run you double it to 18. But here, moving through rough ground then halves that distance. But you have to at least be moving 4.5 to make it a run, otherwise it's just an advance. That's odd, but that would be equivalent to an infantry model moving 3 inches through rough ground on a run order, which I wouldn't bother doing. I'd just make that an advance, but this is an assault. But infantry can do that, because if infantry, like, they get the advantage of the enemy not being able to fire if they're within 6 inches or within 3 inches even. I'm not actually certain what this means, kind of what change this is actually making. We very rarely see tanks charging anyway. I don't think I've ever seen I think the only time I've seen it is for running down artillery units, just crushing the gun kind of thing. It doesn't matter whether the crew pass their leadership test or not, you just drive over the gun. So next one is, if a unit is shooting at an enemy unit that is down, with only some of the target models within point blank, does the benefit of down count or is negated for the whole? You'd measure that, kind of roll them separately. Yeah, that's what it says. It's the one thing that complicates the shooting in the bolt action, both 2nd edition and 3rd edition. It's kind of the same, is that when you have different ranges and different rules that happen at different ranges, any model that's within that is going to roll one way, and any model that's outside that range is going to roll separately. So you do end up with multiple kind of rolls all being done at the same time. And that's also true of combining other special rules, like a rifle and submachine gun. Submachine gun is going to ignore a movement penalty, and the rifle isn't. So they're going to roll separately because their hit roll is going to be different. Short of simplifying weapon choice down even more than we really should, I don't think there's a way to really fix that. I generally don't take more than 2 weapon types in a single squad. So light machine gun and rifles, or a couple of submachine gun and rifles. I usually don't mix assault rifle and light machine gun and submachine gun and rifle in one, because then you're just rolling all sorts of different dice and it gets confusing. That said, I do like having 1 submachine gun and 1 light machine gun, the classic 10-man squad kind of thing. Right, next one is hold until relieved victory condition. The objective is worked out at the end of each unit's activation or at the end of the game. Just once at the end of the game, yeah. Almost all of the bolt action objectives, there are a few exceptions, but most of the ones in the rulebook missions are at the end of the game. Whoever's on the objective or in the table quarter or whatever wins, or off the board edge. There's only the ones that are like specifically destroying a terrain piece, destroying an objective. I don't remember what they're called. I read through them once. Can a cavalry unit dismount at the end of an escape move? Yes, because it is an advance. That's interesting and useful. Not sure why cavalry... It depends on the situation, so yeah, there's certainly use for that. When a unit's entry says that a piece of gear can be given to a man, can it also be given to the NCO? No, because the word man is the very 1940s soldier without a rank expression. Yeah, that makes sense. And they usually say, like, the NCO can take a submachine gun and 3 men can take a submachine gun, so there is that distinction there. So no, that's not how it should be. And that's pretty much what it says here. Does heavy machine gun with +1 pen apply pins over its half of its range? And yes, it does, because it's still a heavy weapon, even though it's reduced to 0 pen, +0 pen. It's still in that heavy weapons category, and so it still gets the bonus, or still is doing pins. And there's a few other situations where a heavy weapon, against like armored cars and armored transports and that kind of thing, when you're shooting at the side armor, with 0 pen, a rifle wouldn't be able to do any damage, but like a heavy machine gun at long range can, just has to roll a 6 to do it. Whereas small arms can't, even on the side armor. So does reinforced front armor work against attacks like Soviet dogs? No, the reinforced front rule only works against shots. Hang on, just let me read that again. The reinforced armor rule does not work against either the dogs and the suicide team because it states shots, and so it only applies against ranged attacks. However, in the entry for the Soviet anti-tank dogs, it says that it's treated as a shooting attack. And again, I don't have the rulebook in front of me to confirm that, but clarification is made. We'll play it this way. I'm just questioning the wording of the original entry. I don't necessarily think it matters. The reinforced armor, there's only a couple of units that have that, like the airborne Jeep and Panther. I think the Panther has +1 armor on the front. Anyway. Can a unit subjective to some form of compulsory activation capture objectives if they end their activation within scoring range of them? For example, if a unit panics and foobars and runs away and ends up going down within 3 inches of an objective, can they capture it? Yes, that's an odd way of getting an objective, but that certainly counts. Yeah. I'd certainly play it that way. And again, as I mentioned just a moment ago, a lot of the mission objectives are just where the units are at the end of the game, not necessarily what they're doing or how they got there. If more than 50% of models are out of the arc of fire of a fixed weapon or vehicle mounted weapon, and the unit is in the open, does the unit get a cover save? No, because they're only for intervening terrain and not an arc. That's interesting. Imagine a vehicle with a bow machine gun, a tank with a bow machine gun, and there's an enemy infantry squad, and you can see 3 of them in the front arc, and the other 7 you can't see, they're out of arc. Now that means that if that squad's in the open, they don't get cover save. But if there's a wall in between the tank and the infantry squad that is also out of the arc of the machine gun that we're talking about firing, then the unit does get a cover save, even though the machine gun can never shoot anywhere near the wall. I guess you could say that the cover save has to do with line of sight and observation, and not just a case of physically blocking fire. It's the cover versus concealment concept that many military historians will be aware of. But sure, that's fine. It's only cover counts from terrain and not from firing arcs. It does make sense in that kind of way. Although there'll be no matter how you write it, there will be some weird edge case situation where it sort of doesn't make sense. That's just the nature of tabletop wargames. Is it okay to ignore small pieces of terrain like a single tree or cattle or a single crate or barrel? Talk with your opponent before the game. Yeah, that's essential. As usual, it's good to agree with your opponent which bits of... Yeah. It's something that particularly the old hands of our group are very good at, is that at the beginning of the game, we look through each other's list, make sure that your opponent understands what they're up against, and also we look at the board and we say, that and that heavy cover, that and that are rough ground and light cover. We'll ignore that. Bridges are open ground from this direction or heavy cover from this direction. That kind of thing. And that is a habit that I really do need to deliberately pick up so that when I'm playing against a new opponent or anything like that, we can do that before the game actually starts. And we go, right, this is what all of the terrain means. And these little individual tiny bits, they look cool, but they're not actually enough to block line of sight or to provide cover or anything like that. And it actually even mentions moving stuff around. Yeah, so you should agree which bits you can move and which bits you can't. I did a video a while back on forests and having a forest tile and then individual model trees, and you can move around the model trees because you use, for the rules of the game, you use the forest tile, kind of the big base. That's where the rules of the trees count. and so the individual trees can move around so that you can move your model tanks and infantry over it without causing problems. Right, so that is all of the rulebook updates. There was actually only a couple of updates and mostly the FAQ. I do want to... There was one that I wanted to check up on. I don't remember what it was that I wanted to... There was something I wanted to check up on, and I can't remember what it was. I'll work it out when I review to edit this video. But let's look at... Now that we've done the rulebook, let's go over to the armies of Germany. And we've had most of this stuff from last time, and there's just a few updates to have a look at. So the stationary firing platform may not fire if it's given an advance order. Now, I understand that the firing platform essentially makes an artillery unit have a 360-degree arc, I think, and so a normal artillery piece would have a fire order and shoot in its front arc, or an advance order so that it could rotate without moving and make a new front arc, and then it'd get a -1 because it's moved, and then a run order to actually move any kind of distance, at which point it couldn't fire. But the stationary platform, a fire order means it can fire in 360, and a run order I assume is unchanged because these are artillery weapons, but that means that the advance order is kind of null for these units. It wouldn't be used. I could be wrong on that, and again, I don't have my books with me, so I can't check it. Page 26, officer, and page 28, forward observer. Change the third option to one model may replace their rifle with an assault rifle for +6 points. That is 6 points the standard for the Sturmgewehr now? I think it is, because it's 4 points for a submachine gun and 6 points, especially with the reduction in capability of close combat, just the way that the rules have changed on that. Submachine guns are just less important. Kind of having big submachine gun squads in second edition was really powerful up close, but now not so much. But the assault rifle at 6 points almost doesn't seem worth it really anymore. You're getting an extra shot, but at slightly shorter range. So there's certainly some use to be had there. Let's go. Let's have a look at the ED-SKaR 250-8 Stummel and -9 Stummel. So it's the smaller one and the bigger one with the light howitzer on the front. And I really like this one. I have the Warlord Games kit of this with the Stummel. I've got the 251, and it is fantastic. Drop a unit of 8 veterans, and then support them with a light howitzer at close range. It is a really useful thing. So replace the second option, adding a pintle-mounted forward-facing machine gun with a coax for the howitzer for 5 points. Ooh. I don't think there's really much value in having a coax on that thing, because you're never going to shoot the machine gun at a vehicle. You're always going to shoot the... maybe a soft skin. Yeah, if you're shooting at infantry, whether they're in cover or out of cover, you're going to use the howitzer, because that's what it's for. That's what the vehicle is for. Against a vehicle, you're like an armoured vehicle, you're almost certainly going to shoot the howitzer as well, because it has an AP value. But against soft skins, the chance of getting at least one hit out of the machine gun's extra shots, that's situational, and I don't think it matters enough. If I'm right, the mount for the Stummel, like the infrastructure on that vehicle, it just had a medium machine gun in it. It wasn't like some had and some didn't, although maybe the infantry have grabbed one, taken it off the vehicle to use dismounted. So if you don't take that machine gun, it effectively means that the only weapon that the vehicle has is the howitzer. And I think that's fine. I would probably just run it without. I don't think I'd run it. I think the pintle mount's the better option, because if you have a 360-degree arc and also being able to shoot both at the same time. But the coax, that's just not valuable, I think. So the ED-SKaR 231 8 rad. You can take one inexperienced for 76 points. I assume that's an adding, because it says add. The ED-SKaR 250-1. Oh, sorry, the -4. Replace the pintle-mounted machine gun with 2 pintle-mounted machine guns covering the front arc, losing all transport capacity for 10. This is the one that everyone's been crying about. Yeah, I've been hearing about. Everyone's been using this with the double machine guns and the transport capacity. But now it's not. Now it doesn't have the transport capacity because it's an anti-aircraft vehicle. It's not supposed to have transport. And yeah, it then isn't a transport vehicle. It's now an armored fighting, or it's now a fighting vehicle. Yeah, that makes sense. I know a lot of people are. Well, I know certain people, power gamers, are sad about this, but realistically, just use it as a normal 250. I mean, 250s with the machine gun is still fine. Transport of 5, drop a little squad off, and you've got a machine gun to support it. It's like just a smaller version of the 251 Stummel, where you've got slightly reduced transport. It's only 8, not the full 12, but you've got the howitzer to play with. And down here are the crew of the flamethrower team armed with pistols, or does that only refer to the Einstoßflammenwerfer crew? It's only the special one. Unlike normal flamethrower crews, they are not replaced with unarmed models when they fire the weapon. They are remain equipped with pistols. Is that a one-shot flamethrower? Yeah, so it's essentially the flamethrower version of a Panzerfaust. It's a one-shot weapon. Can't they be given a rifle? Limiting them to a pit. I mean, by the time you've shot a one-shot flamethrower, it may not matter what other things you have, because you're nose first into the enemy and they either died or they will kill you. But that is all of the changes for Germany, which is not actually that much. The 251 Stummel, well, both of the Stummel variants having that coax machine gun seems a bit silly. These are just minor changes, and the anti-aircraft 250 losing its transport. People are sad about that, but realistically, that's just a sensible change. But we also have the first one here for the Armies of the USA. Now, I haven't read the Armies of the USA, and I've been trying to pick one up, I just haven't got around to it. So all of this stuff is new, but I don't have anything to reference it, so I'm probably just going to scan through this relatively quickly. So, stationary firing platform is exactly the same changes with Germany. It's almost like that should be in the rulebook and not in the Armies of. That stationary firing platform, I think most nations, or at least certainly quite a few of them, will have some variant of this. So that should have been in the rulebook, not in the Armies of. Airborne units are not allowed to be inexperienced, I guess. And anything in that selector can be... anything veteran in that selector can get stubborn as well. Does that include vehicles? I assume not, but does it include artillery? Stubborn artillery. It's a waste of points. But last bullet point, for headquarters, the unit may be given horses for 3 points. Is that anyone? Because for Germany, you had to take the minimum choices with horses or the other options before you could take the officer. Is this now the American officer can just take horses? That'd be interesting. US Marine Corps, 3 submachine guns for 3 points each. 3 points, not 4 points. Although if this is Marines, then maybe they already have tough fighters, and so getting the submachine gun, the 1 point for tough fighters and the 3 points for the rest of the submachine gun. Marauders, same thing, 3 points, and possibly they already have tough fighters. And also for the War Dog team, just everyone's submachine guns fused, submachine guns fused. Everybody gets a submachine gun. Twin 20 millimeters is getting 65 points as regular. I don't have the book, so I don't know what it was originally. GMC is the gun motor carriage. Oh yeah, so it's light anti-tank gun on. Is that the armored M6? I think. I don't think that's an unarmored variant. Have a heavy machine gun on a pintle mount, because you always want. It's just Americans. They always have heavy machine guns on everything. Reconnaissance jeep. Yes. Yes, please. Yes. I know that the reconnaissance jeep can have a regular version, whereas the airborne jeep has to be veteran. And at the moment, or previous to this errata, only the airborne jeep had the heavy machine gun. And the normal one, the reconnaissance jeep and the normal one didn't. They just had medium machine guns. So now we can take a normal, regular Jeep with a heavy machine gun, and that's, I'm going to have to check points for that, but it's going to be a lot less than the airborne armored Jeep with the heavy machine gun is 80 something, 84 points, I think. Whereas it really should be more like 30 or 35. How much is the normal machine gun? No, the normal medium machine gun Jeep's 40. So if this is plus 10 points, this would be 50 points. That's fine. That's better than 80 for one little unit. I like having it around because it can nip around and put some supporting fire for your infantry moving up. Jeeps can also get amphib for... Okay, that's fine. Rangers lead the way is resolved before prep bombardment. Rules clarification. Right, so that's the Americans as well, and that is everything for the June 2025 update, Errata and FAQ for Bolt Action 3rd edition. Honestly, there's not a lot of changes. There's just the odd clarification of things, probably some grammatical changes and that kind of updates. The transport for the anti-air half-track doesn't really matter unless you're a power gamer and you've bought loads of them thinking they're awesome. And for the Americans, I like the heavy machine gun Jeep. But others, it's just the odd option here and there and points cost. Yeah, so a whole lot of not very much. But thank you very much to Warlord Games for keeping the game alive. And thank you all very much for watching. I will sign off because it is warm and I am tired. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.